And thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about subjects that come up frequently in the work that all of us do. And that would be how we work with our clients, and really help them to work through their challenges. And we're going to talk about trauma-informed care and harm reduction. Each of these care models can be beneficial as we provide, as Larissa was speaking of, what we are here specifically trying to support everyone with is the housing and tenancy support activities within your work. And it's, those tools are also helpful, to help clients move through their transitions so that they have an overall recovery. And so I wanted to just share a little bit about myself. My area for the region of CSH is considered the Southeast region. And I support the work and the impact of our organization in over 4 states, Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina. And over the last couple of years, our team has worked very closely with Alliance and other statewide partners in North Carolina who are focused on homelessness, affordable and supportive housing, and seek to increase the capacity of hardworking direct service providers like all of you. CSH is a national organization with staff on the ground in 26 locations across the country. Our mission is to advance solutions that use housing as a platform for services to improve the lives of the most vulnerable people, to maximize public resources similar to all of the funding that the Biden administration is making available to communities across the country, and to build healthy communities. Through our partnership with Alliance Health, CSH is supporting the ongoing efforts to increase stabilization of its members and specifically to achieve the goals around the housing transitions to permanent housing that lead to successful community integration and greater levels of self-sufficiency. So our highlights today will cover, who are the many players involved in tenancy support and what considerations around engaging them have significant impact. And we'll dive into what it means to deliver services with a trauma-informed care lens. And then we will also share and articulate some core principles that improve the safety of our clients through harm reduction. Certainly, it's clear to all of us who do this work that we understand we do not do it alone. As we say in many of our families, it takes a village. And so it is also in support of housing. What we all share, of course, is the tenant. They are the one who drives all of the activity that we are here to support. Getting to stabilization is really all about their choices in services, housing, and their health. Then there is the service community. Supportive housing specialists offer individual service planning and housing stabilization. Other direct services teams like physicians and clinicians, employment coaches, caseworkers, substance use case managers, those are the ones who deliver certainly their respective disciplines of care. And then thirdly, we have the system of care coordination, where Alliance falls, and that includes the managed care organizations, medical homes, public health departments. As we continue to learn about what works and what may not work, these entities remain distinct for the most part, but the roles and the service expectations have intersected and in some cases been redirected to drive better outcomes for our clients, as is the case with this tenancy support element that is now aligned with the ACT and CST services and interactions. All of us are in this together, and all of our perspectives are valuable. As much as you feel comfortable, I invite you to share examples and ideas today in the chat. We want this to be an interactive session, and your perspective and experiences are what makes this such a powerful group to learn from. So we'll talk a little bit about engaging. That's what we do day in and day out, right? When engaging tenants, just want to reiterate a few considerations. And then, we'll talk a little bit about some other principles. We want to be real. It's super important when we're working with clients, anyone really, to be authentic. Just be as real as you can be. You want to be consistent, meaning you want to follow through on what you say you're going to do, and or clearly communicate when something didn't go as you expected and you're not able to do that. You want to be flexible and supportive. And it's challenging when poor decisions, sometimes are made by our clients, and you have to resist telling them what to do. Or there could be the reverse, where some tenants, seem to just let you take the driver's seat, and they just do, they don't take full ownership. So you just have to be flexible and adjust accordingly. We want to continuously take time to examine how does our culture or one's culture influence how we interact with one another? What sort of relationships, are we seeking or are we building? Are they relationships that help us to move those individuals, into stabilization and into housing, and that translate into their independence? So just a few additional reminders around how we individually and professionally engage with our clients. And like I said, frankly, to me, these things apply to how we engage with one another. They're very value-based characteristics, but they are important, to engage with intention. So when you keep them in mind, they will help you to be more effective in using some of the strategies we're talking about today. In recent times, these terms and these principles have been described under the context of cultural competency. And so that's kind of a buzzword that you've heard over the last few years. SAMHSA defines cultural competence as the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. I actually like another term that one of my colleagues shared, and she refers to it as cultural humility. Because I think you just have to sometimes take a step back, think about things as they present themselves and from the perspective of other people. And so I try to look at it as doing it with humility. In practice, both individuals and organizations can be very cultural competent. The culture really must be considered at every step of the engagement with clients. And the term culture really goes beyond race or ethnicity. It can also refer, to characteristics like age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, religion, income, and education, a profession, or where you live. So certainly I know that those of you on this webinar have varied job titles and experiences, and all of you play a role in trauma-informed care, no matter what your job title is. The obvious link that most folks might think about are those that have client services in their title or job description. But trauma-informed care is critical for all of you. From a managerial level, it can help you to make informed decisions about the type and kind of programming and support that you provide, not only for your clients, but also for your staff, because truly trauma can affect everyone. From direct services level, it can help you to shift your thinking around some of the interactions you have with clients and how you can make the most welcoming and supportive environment possible, whether that be in person or on the phone. To get started on trauma-informed care, I'd ask you to think about what a safe and supportive space looks and feels like to you. What comes up for you? And please remember, there are no right or wrong answers, and it's very different for everyone. And Larissa, I'll ask if you can monitor the chat for me. I'm afraid I'm not able to see both the chat and my screen and notes. So if you can just monitor that and help offer any comments that are relative, please.
I will. Yep.
Thank you very much.
So we have judgment-free zone.
Yep. Yep. Don't judge because you
Safety.
don't know. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Safety. Mhm. Welcoming, listening, open, clear conversation, understanding, clear boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
as unintrusive as possible.
There you go. Yes. Yes. That's spot on. Yep. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. And so we'll just give another quick definition of what is trauma. Individual trauma results from or can result from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances experienced by an individual as physical or emotionally harmful or a life-threatening situation that often has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So this is just one definition of trauma. Another one from SAMHSA in their Integrated Health Solutions Center. But there's certainly many more out there. Let's talk about types of trauma. As we think about it, there are multiple ways in which trauma can occur. And there are 4 categories really that they fall under. They would be large-scale events, interpersonal, historical trauma, or systemic trauma. So when you think of large-scale events, those are things like you see in the news, things that rise to that level, natural disasters and things that affect everyone across the globe or across a particular area. Interpersonal events are just that. They are for an individual or a group of individuals, but typically, at the very individual level, and might include things like assault or violence, and could include things that really aren't even physical, such as divorce or a loss of a loved one. Historical trauma can include violence or segregation or prevention of a cultural or spiritual practice that is designed by trying to prevent that. You're trying to alter the culturalism and force that group or individual to assimilate into another group of people. Lastly, systemic trauma is something that creeps into the fabric of a society. It can be overt or covert, and it builds up over time. I can give one example of systemic trauma that comes up in the housing arena or is relative to the housing arena, and it really has affected so much else. And that's the practice of redlining, which happened for decades and is quite frankly still on the books in some places, even though it may not be in practice, it's still documented somehow. But it's where the government did not allow individuals from certain ethnic groups to own homes or land in certain areas. And so those red line areas were reserved only for white homeowners or property owners. Unfortunately, like I said, the legacy of redlining remains today. If you were to overlay, for example, a geographic map for those with health disparities and food deserts and other deficiencies within their community, it truly directly lines up with the historical maps of where redlining once took place very actively. So it's not happenstance, unfortunately, that a person's zip code has a direct correlation on their life support opportunities as well as their life expectancy. And that's some pretty heavy stuff, right? One thing to keep in mind is that systemic trauma is very connected to historical trauma, as it can really remind people of, what that historic trauma was. So when thinking of deploying trauma-informed care principles and an approach to it, what we want to do is to realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand the potential paths rather, for recovery. We want to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in our clients, in our families, our staff, and others involved in the system. When I sometimes am talking with family, you think about something that they'll say to you, and it may be a sign that they're struggling with something. And so oftentimes you just have to be kind of cued in and listen. And then, of course, you want to respond by fully integrating the knowledge about whatever that trauma is, and making sure that you're integrating all of these principles into your policies and your procedures and your daily operational practices. And then finally, you want to seek to actively resist re-traumatization. I think someone said that in the chat, that you definitely want to avoid bringing that back into the forefront of anyone's mind. So trauma-informed care is often described as a shift in thinking that moves from asking or thinking, what's wrong with you, over to what happened to you. Everyone's story is different. And for a lot of folks we work with, whether it be a client, a colleague, staff, or supervisor, you just may never know the full extent of the sorts of traumas that they've experienced in the past. So when you approach each person with curiosity and humility, it can really help shift the interactions that you have. And as an added bonus, this really helps not only for the work, but it can help you personally as well, which is what I found in my experience. There are 6 key principles of the trauma-informed approach that reflects, they're really meant to be principles rather than a prescribed set of procedures or practices, and can be generalized across multiple types of settings. But overall, it's critical to promote that there's a linkage to recovery and resilience for those impacted by trauma. So first is safety. When working with individuals using a trauma-informed approach, it's important to keep safety in mind at every turn. This isn't just physical safety, but it's also emotional safety. And then second is trustworthiness and transparency. People do feel safe when they know what to expect, what's coming. And they also, when people know others will follow through. Think about how many times, you've been disappointed, and, that can happen. But we just strive to do and be as trustworthy and transparent about things as we can. And when we create an atmosphere of trust and openness, we can really utilize this positive space. So people that we work with know that they can trust us and that there aren't any gotcha moments that will come up later. For those of you that are supervisors, this is really critical to do with your staff as well. Third would be peer support. And I know this is really huge in the space of behavioral health. Peer support is critical for folks that we work with and for us as providers. And certainly, I know that, again, your service delivery incorporates and requires strong peer engagement and that you all have staff with lived experience and expertise. And using peer support helps to connect our clients and helps them to flourish. You know, when you connect them with peers, it really helps them to flourish and gain support in a way that, unfortunately, those of us without those experiences may not be able to provide. Fourth would be collaboration and mutuality. And I encourage you to just consider this visual when it comes to this collaboration and mutuality, where we are walking with a person side by side instead of walking behind them or in front of them. You know, your client's goals are exactly that. They are their goals. But consider how you collaborate with them to help them achieve their goals and reduce any possible roadblocks that they've encountered or are in the midst of. And the fifth principle centers around empowerment, voice, and choice. These are really critical in the quality of life and meaning for all of us. Everyone wants choices. And as much as we are able, it's very powerful to be able to provide choices to those that we work with. A lot of times folks just haven't been able to have a say in what happens to them. This could be anything from where they sleep to what they eat, you know, to the clothing options that are available to them, and sometimes even what happens to their bodies. So by providing even a small amount of choices, we can help bring back dignity, and it can help people overcome, you know, what seems to be overwhelming. You know, I know that this one can sometimes be a challenge because we have to follow a lot of rules and regulations. But if, you know, we can make any adjustments that help us to achieve, you know, the same end goal, then that is what would be encouraged. And then sixth, and the final principle, is on cultural, historic, and gender issues. Consider all of those elements that make a person feel safe and supported. One's own culture, gender identity, and what happens or has happened in their past really all shape who we are. And it's important to be sensitive to those things, not making any assumptions now, but be sensitive to them and incorporate them so that people feel comfortable. So we've learned or heard about the 6 key principles. Now let's talk through 3 critical moves for practicing trauma-informed care. Again, first, we want to reduce the harm of the ongoing trauma. Wherever possible, you want to eliminate or reduce the impact of traumatic experiences that are still occurring. Perhaps the clearest example in support of housing is the fact that we are assisting people exiting the traumatic state of literal homelessness by helping them to move into housing, permanent housing. And you all know many tenants find this transition itself very disruptive and overwhelming. So we just have to find ways to reduce, you know, and make it easier for them. Secondly, we want to build resilience. We can't take away what happened, you know, for that matter, but we can help folks to build resilience so that they will be less impacted by trauma. In a field like supportive housing, where both participants and staff are dealing with the impacts, this applies to everyone, not just the tenants and the clients. We have to realize that we do have control over many things and find those things that we can control, and then provide the needed supports and strength to get past those traumatic events. Thirdly, we work to avoid, again, that re-traumatization. It's just not possible to provide an environment that will assure that no one will ever have or experience these triggers in feelings and memories. But it is possible to be respectful of the structure of the environment that you provide that makes it less likely for it to occur, and give participants, again, that power of choice over how and when they are reminded of that distressing experience. What are some examples that you can think of to help those you serve reduce ongoing trauma, build resilience, and reduce the likelihood of re-traumatization? I encourage you to add something in the chat. Any examples that you can think of? I would suggest, oh, go ahead, Larissa.
We have one that says definitely giving them options so that they can make an empowered choice.
Yes.
Give the tools and resources needed to handle difficult situations. Very good.
Mhm.
Finding the right services.
There you go.
Mhm.
Yep.
Support groups. Excellent.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely finding the housing that keeps them safe, but a housing that they want to live in.
Yep. So
Yeah.
finding the right fit for services and providing supports through changes. Those are two different ones.
No problem.
Speaking to and not at the person, being respectful. Very good.
Yep. Okay, excellent.
Meet
Thank
them
you
where
for-
they are. Oh, we got a couple more. Meet them where they, oh, they're coming in fast and
Okay,
furious.
no problem. Good. Great.
Okay, so let me see. I lost where I was. Performing through changes, speak to them. Okay. Meet them where they are and not where you think they should be. Ooh, very good. Person-centered in every interaction. Very good. Providing a safe and therapeutic environment. Excellent.
Yep, those are all great. All great. And so that leads us into the topic of harm reduction, which is very closely aligned to the tenets of trauma-informed care. Harm reduction is a set of practical strategies that helps to reduce the negative consequences of things that are harmful to individuals, like substance use or other harmful activities and behaviors, while incorporating a spectrum of strategies. You know, you're going to be using a few things to help them through. And it meets the clients, you know, that are struggling or working to overcome substance use disorders, as someone said a few minutes ago, where they are along their personal journey. And it seeks to address the conditions or the root causes of that use. You know, instead of focusing just on the use itself. And so the goal would be to move clients along the spectrum of doing it more safely, then helping them to manage it better, and then ultimately to a position where they are able to maintain abstinence. It is not an overnight situation. I think all of you probably know that. But through using this as a tool and a strategy, harm reduction allows you to move closer to that other end of the spectrum. So this is a philosophy that was shared from the Midwest Harm Reduction Institute, encompassed around harm reduction. And it can be articulated as one that promotes and supports the right of people who use substances and engage in other risky behaviors to be treated with dignity and respect. Their right to exercise self-determination related to use, and their right to expect and receive collaboration in therapeutic relationships. When we say self-determination, to me, that's truly where choice comes into play, because it's, when we have adult children, and, as you're raising kids, it's they have to still be able to make their own choices. And because you can't make those choices for them as adults. And so that's one of the ways I kind of relate to self-determination. So we want to make sure that we understand what harm reduction is not. It is definitely not intended to be passive or enabling, or even a way to get clients into treatment. It's certainly not where we ignore what's happening by taking a don't ask, don't tell approach. And it does not allow the clients to believe that anything goes, that it's okay to just do what was already happening. The harm reduction strategy does aim, to reduce the harms associated with certain behaviors for individuals and groups. It
Um,
emphasizes the value and benefit of choices that lead to good health, social, and economic outcomes, as opposed to the focus or even a measurement of consumption of that which could cause them harm. And so these core principles, are something that you can continue to keep in mind when working, with clients and helping them to make their individual plans. Just keep in mind, of course, that individuals have their own voice, and to focus again on the reduction of the harm versus focus on the consumption.
Excuse me, Deidre, there's a question
Yeah.
about the last slide. Can you elaborate on how it is not passive or enabling? It's a good question.
Okay. Yeah. So it is certainly not meant to um, be such that you put a rubber stamp to say it is okay. I think when you say passive, think of the opposite, where it is intentional. That when you're working with someone to work through situations, then you are going to want to be more intentional about it, and not, um, just allow them to um, stay in the same place. And so you want them to be as focused and intentional as possible. I don't know if I've helped provide any better clarity around that. Um, but it's designed to just offer a very focused and intentional approach, but not allowing things to just kind of fall by the wayside. In other words, that don't ask, don't tell. It's not that you're going to just ignore something that might be a cue or sign that there's something that still needs to be addressed. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, so the response was, so basically it's the gray area where we have to walk the line, and then, it was, I understand. So it's kind of that in between of supporting, but yet not enabling.
Right. It's supporting, it's, that gentle tug, that nudging, but it's still allowing them to help move the needle. You're helping them to move the needle for themselves. Yeah. It is a gray line. I would acknowledge that too, when you're working with that. So going back to the principles, just keeping in mind that, you know, aside from maybe what's documented within their plans, there really are no predefined outcomes. And even if it's documented in that plan, it's okay if some things need to change. If, through your conversations and your interactions, something that was previously there needs to be modified, that's okay, as long as the client is involved in that decision. Um, and again, it's not judging their choice to engage in some of the behaviors. It's not judging that. It is really just helping them to understand the impacts of it. Um, and then the individual is expected again to be responsible for their own behavior. And always, always, always that we're treating our clients and each other with dignity. So, in what ways can we apply a harm reduction principle, the harm reduction principles? We will first determine what is the harm, isolate and identify, again, what are the harmful impacts that are taking place and that are generated as a result of that use. And then secondly, and in some ways you're going to want to, again, safety is a very important aspect of care. You offer some alternatives to approaches that seek to prevent or end, the drug use or the harmful behavior. And keeping people, who engage in harmful behaviors or use substances, keeping them alive and protecting their health are truly the most urgent priorities. So focusing on safety. We want to lead with changes to behaviors over the actual use. Harm reduction approaches are facilitative rather than coercive, meaning we ease and assist in situations, driving the behavior versus forcing or strong arming. Harm reduction techniques aim to reinforce positive change in a person's life, no matter how small or incremental that change may be. And then fourth, alongside, like I said, alongside, not in front, not behind, not pushing, not tugging, you're going to create a plan for intervention that works, with the client to create their own treatment plan and helps them to create their own roadmap towards the recovery process. And it goes without saying, all of you know this, that plan is individualized, but it should be somewhat time limited. No goal is worth having if you don't have, if it can't be specific and if it doesn't have a time limit on it. So it should have some type of uh, time element to that goal. So it should have the targets and the goals that they are set for themselves and when they, feel like they can achieve those goals. And that plan, again, is outcome driven and focused on the purpose. Why is it important to set these goals and to go through the plan? Why is that important? And what will it allow them to do or to achieve? So these are just some intervention examples. Not all of them are some that you would necessarily utilize with every client, but they are just ways that harm reduction practices can be demonstrated. When working with clients, um, they have proven to be pretty effective in many cases. So in your specific work, I know that you may have some familiarity with many of these, but for those that are going through substance use recovery, it's certainly about reducing use, monitoring, um, to some extent, providing other resources that make it easier for them to transition. Making suggestions in how they alter um, their patterns that would make it least likely for them to engage in that risky behavior. If it means going a different route or, taking some time, changing up their routines and their daily activities. Um, Finding ways that they can use those, what they would normally pay for that engagement for that substance, make sure that it's reallocated to something that helps them to achieve their overall goals. And I know earlier someone mentioned support groups and offering peer support. And certainly those are excellent ways to help individuals um, through their transitions. So we know that often people can put up protective barriers, or they may even feel like they have everything under control. I got this. I'm good. I don't need that. However, in supportive housing and in behavioral health, we know that even when they say no, that we still have a responsibility to continue to be there for them and for each other. Harm reduction certainly requires um, a very steady level of consistency and resilient intervention. And so as providers, we can use a mix of strategies that are based on the client's unique needs and responsiveness. And some of those options, include certainly the wraparound services that are very targeted to their needs, providing education to them around safer practices. You can, make sure that you have regularly scheduled well checks and check-ins with clients, so that they have an opportunity to demonstrate that they are making headway and that they're making progress, and that their efforts are able to be recognized. Again, just making sure that we're having that continued outreach with the clients. And even, I know many of you help with the medication management for clients. And so that is a big part of providing harm reduction support. So wanted to share here in this slide deck, you'll see just a few additional resources that are available around harm reduction that you can go and take a look at. Some of the information we've drawn from in this presentation, but these are some additional resources that you can reference as well. So in closing, it is likely very clear from the work that you all do and that we all do with clients that we serve what the impacts of trauma look like and what the impacts can have on their lives, whether it's from systemic or historical, or even from their personal events that have happened to them. So, in addition to the traumatic experience of homelessness itself, many persons experiencing homelessness or housing instability also have histories of other types of trauma, like the ones that you see often with your clients. And in some cases, the trauma, may have resulted from a one-time event, or in others, there were multiple incidents over a period of years, possibly even beginning as far back as childhood. But we must keep in mind that all of these experiences can impact how every aspect of how individuals function and respond are are present and that they influence every situation. The overarching goals of both trauma informed care and harm reduction are focused around ensuring people live with security and safety and can live with stabilization, that they can be as independent and stable as possible. And we use these multidisciplinary, non-judgmental approaches, as we said earlier, to meet people where they are along their personal journey. And we focus on building skills, for their self-care, along with lowering their personal risk. And housing stabilization really is one of those things that promotes clients' ability to thrive through their supportive housing treatment options, and move closer towards recovery. It helps to build trust. And it also gives, again, builds their skills or rebuilds their skills. And the ultimate goal is to help them to reintegrate into the community. So, we really, through all of the work that we're doing collectively, we do it with a housing focused lens. Um, and throughout the service delivery around stabilization and harm reduction, um, staying housing focused for and along with our clients can really drive successful outcomes. Everybody deserves to live safely and comfortably. That enables good health for overall well-being and success. And we've learned and acknowledged that stable housing is really a core element of the social determinants of health. So I offer one last opportunity, certainly if you'd like to enter in the chat, what maybe new harm reduction or trauma-informed engagement strategies you might consider trying in the future with your clients.
Yep. Overdose prevention.
Some of those tools around helping people to taper down and give them resources to get to abstinence, safer use, managed use. Mhm.
Like helping them with Narcan kits. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that they have those. Excellent.
Mhm. Yep. And not being shameful. I think, this is a space where, oftentimes clients recognize, that there's something different. But helping them to realize that it's okay and that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and just to take that they have the power and the control and the choice.
One said, my agency gives Narcan, but not clean needles. That may be something to consider when we know someone is going to use. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, certainly I want to thank all of you for your participation today and attention. Certainly, if you have any additional questions or comments, very open to accepting or receiving those right now.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Deidre, for providing the training. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to the next few trainings. I think we're going to put some things for a provider with property managers as well. And also just a reminder that Deidre is offering office hours coming up on the 19th of August. And you can find the link for that in the same place where you registered for this training. So thank you so much, Deidre. We appreciate your time.
Oh, so welcome and happy to be a part of the work that you all are doing and supporting it. And I actually, for the ACT and CST providers that are on the call, I will also be sending out an actual meeting invite with the link that Larissa, but she'll have it in both places. So for those of you that are not ACT and CST, you'll be able to get it through the the network that Larissa uses. And then the other ACT and CST providers will also receive an invite directly from CSH.